BMW Motorcycle Owners of America present the Short Wheelbase Podcast. With members in all 50 states, Canada, and across the globe, the BMW MOA invites you to ride inspired. Learn more about membership benefits, including roadside assistance, tire hazard protection, and more at bmwmoa.org. The Short Wheelbase Podcast is also brought to you by Boxer 2 Valve, supplier of quality OEM and aftermarket parts and specialty tools, and by Air Support BMW, offering premium driveline rebuilding and performance enhancements for your air-cooled BMW.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 12 of the Short Wheelbase Podcast. As always, I'm Nick, and we have Darren with us back again after his absence last week. How are you doing this week, Darren?
Great job with Katie. I enjoyed the chat, and she snuck in the getting cozy with Malozzi line. I loved it.
Getting cozy with Malozzi, yeah. Her husband Tom said that he's going to trademark it and start charging us for that one.
Okay.
Well, it's good to have you back.
Thank you, buddy.
Like you said, we had Katie last week, but we're kind of back to a slightly more regular program this week. One thing we are going to do differently is we're going to chat quite a bit about your adventure and why you weren't here last week.
Indeed.
And so before we get into that, however, we're going to do some quick garage updates. I have an Airhead Misfits bike that we're going to feature, as promised a few weeks ago, a sidecar.
That's right.
So we'll get into that. It's a 79 R100 sidecar rig. And then for our clip to wrap up this episode this week, you have some audio of the walk around that you did when you sold your 77 R100S.
Indeed.
Correct?
Yeah, that's fun. So it's sort of a virtual tour audio wise of me going through the bike with Charles, who bought it. So it's kind of fun. Kind of fun.
Nice. Yeah. Cool. Well, let's jump into garage updates. I haven't gotten to work on the bike recently because the garage has been stuffed full of house projects, but the garage is clear.
Good.
I have moved all of those house projects along finally. However, there is a lift kit sitting on my workbench behind me for my 4Runner. So that needs to happen first because my shocks are shot. So 4Runner is going to get a couple inches of lift, some new shocks, all new rubber parts. So that's going to happen first.
What year is the FR?
It is a 2006, one of the last of the V8 models.
Yes,
so
indeed.
It's kind of a rig that I almost sold recently, but thought to myself, this thing has been dead nuts reliable for 160,000 miles. I'm just going to fix it up and keep driving it.
That's a Toyota for you.
Exactly. Yep. So that's coming up next for me in the garage, as well as I now have the ability to get to the box of bike. The R90/6 is now available. The shelving unit is no longer blocked. So as soon as the lift kit's on, I'm going to start pulling those boxes out and cataloging everything. So hopefully in the next couple episodes, I'll be able to give an update there on what I have, what I don't have. And maybe some listener will chime in and say, hey, I have a valve cover or whatever it is that you need.
Good.
So that's where we are in my garage. What's going on in yours aside from a new bike coming in the door?
New bike, yeah. So let's see what I got here. So continuing work on the green machine. Just about got it back together after the winter refresh here. First thing I want to say is how convenient it is to have another bike of the same era in the garage when you're working on one. As you can imagine, it's a great reference. So if I need to know sort of how a part was put together or how a cable was run or something like that, quick reference. In this case, I can walk over to the 7590S and check stuff. One thing I was looking at was underneath the brake master cylinder, there's that rubber cable guide router that the sort of spark plug wires go through, and the tachometer thing, the little black plug.
Yeah, it's like
and
that big
I kind of
rubber.
forgot how that was oriented and things like that, and what exactly went through there and how. So I had a quick reference there. The other thing that was of note here is for the second time, I've had to rob a headlight relay off of the off of the 90S. So, which is strange because when I took the green machine apart, the headlight was working fine. And I had pulled all the wires out of the circuit board to lengthen them for longer handlebars. Anyway, I get everything plugged back in and no headlight. So I'm doing some testing here and there. And finally I determined, well, it looks like the relay is not working. Walk over to the 90S, pull the relay out, pop it in. Perfect. So again, what a nice treat to have, the same era bike in there you can rob parts from.
Right.
But the same thing happened to me when I was doing the old 77S that I just sold. And same thing happened. The headlight relay did not work properly after reassembly. And I used, although it was a little bit different, I think that it's different. Don't quote me on this. Maybe it was 77 is the same. Either way, I did the same thing. I robbed the headlight relay from the 90S. So it was the second time that was a relay donor bike, which was just strange. Here's something, Nick, in the garage updates that I was doing. You remember we talked about I had the Centec fuse box and then a relay for switch power.
Yeah.
On the 77S. And you'll hear me talk, I think, about this with Charles in the podcast segment. Anyway, so I did the same setup on the green machine here. In this case, I'm just running the heated grips through that setup. So this way, if I shut the bike off and leave the heated grips switch on, it won't run the battery down. That's the whole purpose for that. Interestingly enough, though, the way this is wired up, somebody may be able to chime in the comments here, and I think I know what's going on to a degree, but the way the relay is wired up, I've got a hot lead coming from the positive part of the battery, the ground lead coming from the battery. Both those connect to the Centec fuse box. And of course, those leads are coming from the relay. Without getting too much into the wiring scheme, what ends up happening is the whole reason I'm doing this is not to run the battery down. And I don't want the clock running all the time when the bike's parked for obvious reasons. Those old clocks only have so many ticks in them.
Yeah.
So what I've done, a lot of folks have done this, is they'll take the negative battery lead, cut the loop out, make it into a horseshoe. So you just pull it off the transmission vent bolt, and then you can easily disconnect the power to the battery that way.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening, Nick, is I'll shut the bike, the key is in the off position. I'll pull the negative lead from the transmission vent bolt from the transmission case there, and the clock is still ticking. I'm thinking, well, why is that happening? And of course, as I described, they're still going to the Centec fuse blocks, a hot lead and a negative lead, both going to there. The clock's still ticking. So I'll turn the key on the ignition, and that will sort of discharge the remaining volts, maybe, whatever we want to call it, in the system, and the clock will stop ticking. Okay? With the key in the on position. It'll sort of my thought is it pulls the remaining voltage out of the system and just sort of empties it. Then I'll turn the key back into the off position, and the clock will still have stopped. So I've got the negative battery lead off of the transmission. All the wiring's hooked up through the Centec relay and the fuse box as I described. I try to run the remaining voltage out. The clock stops. Here's the weird thing. This is where it gets strange. If I touch the bike, like move it or jar it in any way, the clock starts back up again. It's really bizarre. And what I'll do then is turn the key on, let it sit for a minute. That'll discharge it. I'll shut it off, and the second hand will stop moving. And I did that last night. Carol, I didn't touch the bike at all. It was fine. I noted where it was. And then as a test this morning, I lifted the seat, closed the seat, and the damn clock just started going again. It is really strange. I don't know what's going on there. Yeah. So maybe somebody, if you're listening and you can follow my convoluted electrical diagram there, you can chime in. I have no idea what's going on. Why?
I had some ideas until you got to if I move the bike.
It's just so strange. It's like you kick it, or any sort of disruption will suddenly start the clock up again. So anyway, there you have it. Honestly, the main solution to that would be just to completely disconnect the lead from the negative lead from the battery to the Centec and all that. Just take it right off the battery terminal. But I've got one of these older BMW batteries that's got the little plastic cover that clips down over it. Yeah. It's a pain in the ass to get in there and disconnect it. Like if I use an Odyssey battery where it's got the terminals right on top, you can just get in there with a 10 millimeter socket, take the bolt out, and disconnect. A lot easier. Yeah, lickety split. So anyway, there's that. So that's that. And then the final thing I'll say is on this, let me make sure I get my notes here. Headlight circuit board. Oh, yeah, okay. The cable. So I'm putting new cables on. Mm-hmm. And you remember how the other nickname for this bike is Rotnacken, would loosely translate from German to redneck.
Right.
I did not realize that there were no cable adjusters on any of these cables. So the brake at the master cylinder, you run the cable through, and there's the little brass U-hook. Mm-hmm. Cable goes through there on the ball end. When I took that off, when I was tearing the bike apart, there was no little brass barrel that the cable went through. Somebody just built up on the end of the terminal end of the cable, just built it up with solder or weld or something, and it was just hooked right to that brass hook. Yeah, I was like, okay. And this is one of those things where when I got on the bike, it was running, everything was working when we were on the trip. I wouldn't have wanted to have known that was the case then.
That would have made me nervous.
Exactly. I was better off ignorant.
Yep. Ignorance is bliss.
Yeah, totally. So, and when I was disassembling the bike, I really did. I noticed that, but I didn't notice that at on the perches that there were no cable adjuster. So, there's the cable adjuster has the little knurled nut that you can adjust the tension, and then it goes into the perch. Now you've got the little piece of felt in there for a cable guide. Neither of the cables had those on there. They were just they had just been, and the reason I finally discovered that is when I was putting them back together, I was like, well, wait a minute, where are these? I had the old cables and everything. I was like, where are these? Where are the adjusters? They were never on there in the first place. So, needless to say, I ordered them, and I'll have that back on. But just another sort of one of these things that just really is a head scratcher with this bike. And I know this motorcycle is going to be thankful that I'm putting it back in its proper operating order and its structure.
Yeah, seriously.
Isn't that weird?
That's totally strange. Yeah. I mean, so it didn't have the the tension adjuster on the handlebar controls? Mm-mm. Wow. How did it even stay in place without that? That's interesting.
Tension. So
just tension.
Yeah.
Interesting. Weird.
Because I think those adjusters, I mean, usually, and I looked on the 90S, and they're almost all the way in on both the cables. I mean, the front brake adjuster is almost useless because your adjustment really is at the master cylinder, right, down in the bottom there. So yeah, either that, Nick, or I just don't know. But I did not have the adjusters when I was going to put it back together. I thought, okay, yeah, time to bleed the brake, and I was like, whoa, wait a minute. So Anyway, I had to order those up, but yeah, just some strange things as I'm working through that motorcycle. But it's all good. It's all good.
Good. Well, it sounds like you're heading in the right path. So that's
I
all that
am in the
really
right path.
matters.
Yes.
Awesome. Well, like I alluded to, we're going to get into more of a deeper garage update with you on the R100S that you just
Yes.
went and rescued. I shouldn't say rescued. It wasn't in need of rescue. It just needed to be in your garage.
That's right. That's right.
But before we jump into that, I wanted to share the Misfit bike of the week, or the featured bike of the week, which comes from Airhead Misfits this time around. As always, if you've got a bike, find me on Instagram at Airhead Misfits, and I will feature it on my Follower Friday posts, as well as send you stickers as a thank you.
You've been getting some more submissions?
I did. I got a huge
Good.
influx in the last couple of weeks. So I've got, I post every other Friday. So I think I've got about 2 or 3 months worth of bikes right now.
Great.
But I'm always looking for more. So anybody out there, if you have an Airhead you want to share with me, find me on Instagram and we'll get that set up. This week, the bike comes from at Ryan_SK48.
Okay.
And it's a 1979 R100 with a Velar X sidecar. So I'm going to post up some pictures here as I kind of talk through what he sent me. So this bike, it holds a pretty special place in Ryan's heart. It's actually his first Airhead. He purchased it about 17 years ago.
Wow.
It was a non-running basket case when he bought it. Didn't have the sidecar. It was just a standard R100 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he's got a lot of great friends who know how to work on these things. So
that's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So he was able to resurrect the bike. I think one of the biggest things that was wrong with it was I think he said to me that it looked like the Hulk had smashed his hand down on the tank of it and put a massive dent in the top of the tank.
Good grief.
Otherwise, all of it was there. It just wasn't running. So anyway, his buddy Chad McDade, who's on Instagram as SAE Restorations, he's kind of well known for Ace Motorcycle and Scooter, which is a pretty big vintage shop that was in Chicago. I don't believe it's running anymore. I think Chad has kind of taken a step back at this point, but he's a legend in the vintage motorcycle circles around Chicago, and he found the bike for Ryan and helped get it together. And he did all the initial mechanical work for Ryan to get it running. And then another friend of his, who's also named Chad Seville, goes by Midwest Paint Huffer on Instagram. Great name, by the way. He was able to get that massive dent out of the tank. I don't know how much paint he huffed to do that, but he got it out. So he got that all set up, got the paintwork done. You'll notice in the pictures, it follows a pretty close paint scheme to what you'd see on an Airhead, but it has a double pink pinstripe.
Yeah. So we were looking at the photos, and my first reaction was I looked at it and I thought, okay, it's either a 92 or a 79 because it has that silver and blue sort of dual color. But then, you look a little bit closer, and it's pink on the stripes.
Yep, it's pink. It's the same pink that you would have found on a Suzuki Water Buffalo and the T500 Titan, if you're familiar with either of those bikes. Right. So that's where the pink comes from. Right. In 2020, he decided that he needed the sidecar. And that's where another friend of his, Bob Wark, of Workshop in Marietta, Ohio. Yeah. Yep. He's pretty well known for his sidecar work. And so Ryan found the sidecar, took that. It's a Velar X 562. He took that over to Bob with the bike, and in a few weeks, it was done, ready to go.
Yeah.
And so it's been pretty much a perfect adventure machine for him and his wife, Ashley. She absolutely loves riding in the sidecar with him. And they've been all over the Midwest and beyond. And it's still his favorite motorcycle. He owns quite a few other bikes. He actually sent me an R60/6 as well, which I've already posted on my Instagram account. the sidecar bike that we're talking about right now is set to go out on this Friday. So that'll be featured shortly, but he still loves this bike. It's his first Airhead. He loves the sidecar on it, loves going out with his wife and just tootling around. So, he has no intentions of selling this thing. This is his forever bike, I guess you would call it.
All right. Well, we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. I say that about my bike too, but I know that there's always a chance.
Oh yeah. We all say that. We all say that. It's all good until the for sale ad goes up.
Yep.
So have you ridden a sidecar rig before? Driven one, I should say.
I have never, and I really, really want to.
I have a couple times. Years ago down at Benchmark Works, Craig V's place down there in Mississippi, where I did all the /2 stuff. I rode one briefly around, and it was strange. Let's put it that way. Compared to what you're used to. And then maybe a friend of mine had one that I've ridden once before. Not high. I mean, let's put it this way. They're not sort of high performance, long. To me, I don't think of, you're going to jump on a sidecar rig and drive for a week. I mean, gosh, it seems like you're talking about the Hulk. It seems like your shoulders and arms would just be completely puffed up after doing that. But I've not ridden one. The thing I noticed about his bike too is he still has the standard front end on it, and maybe with just a steering damper. Most times when you see a sidecar rig, you see either some sort of adaptation of a Earl's fork sort of setup with
like a leading link or something.
A leading link, thank you. Yeah, that's not the case here. So I'm just curious how he wrestles that thing around. If it gets a little bit tiring, and what's the top speed? How do you use it? Is it an around town rig? If I ever bought a sidecar rig, I wouldn't want to buy a Ural with a 2-wheel drive.
Oh yeah, those are cool.
Yeah, and then I've always thought of it as the perfect dog transporter. But
oh yeah,
right
with the doggles.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those are so neat. But kudos to him, boy, saving that motorcycle. It sounds like it was in a horrible state of repair. I guess he rode it for a while without the sidecar, or
Yeah. It sounds like he's had it for 17 years, and the sidecar went on in 2020.
Yeah.
So he rode it for a while before you put the sidecar on it.
I definitely think this it's a good Misfits bike. So you've got a unique paint scheme, got the sidecar, and this is just one of those bikes that's purpose built, which is ideal. For that criteria.
Exactly. Yeah, like I mentioned, I've never driven a sidecar. I have a lot of interest in them. I've always kind of imagined my conversion bike will get a sidecar at some point. I got to figure out some better brakes before that, because it's already lacking in brake power, even without a sidecar.
Yeah.
I think the struggle for me is I have been looking for a sidecar for it. But I really like the style of the Ural sidecars, and it's really hard to find a Ural sidecar that's Dover white with similar patina to my current bike. So I don't know if I'll ever find that perfect Goldilocks sidecar that I'm after. So we'll see if it ever happens.
You never know.
If anybody has a Ural sidecar in Dover white that's a little rough but not too rough, let me know.
Holler at Nick. Holler at your boy.
Exactly. So cool. Stoked to share that. Like I said, it'll be posted, I think this Friday is where it is on my schedule. So that'll be on Instagram soon. Let's jump over back into a pseudo garage update. Like I mentioned earlier, you were out last week to drive from Tennessee, right? Did I just say the wrong? Arkansas. Sorry, I was just in Tennessee. That's why I'm confusing that. Anyway, so drove all the way out to California to get your R100S.
Yes.
Your third one. So if anybody hasn't been listening, kind of give us the, 2-3 sentence version of what led you to this now third R100S.
Yeah, so let's see. I had the one that you'll hear me doing the walk around with Charles later in the episode here. I bought that in 2022, I think.
Hmm.
And everybody knows the frame had some damage to it. Well, the frame was bent. Let's just put it that way. Damage might be a little bit harsh. Frame needed to be straightened.
Hmm.
So did that and got the bike all dialed in, not in the S format. So we just had standard bars on it, took the fairing off, gauges went on the pods. So I sort of built it up as what I called an R100S slash T. Kind of modeled it after the R100T that came out in 1979. So I had
Hmm.
that bike for a while. I knew all along I didn't think it was going to be a keeper. I knew I had an idea that I was going to sell it at some point. Fast forward about a year or so ago, an ad popped up on maybe it was the Airheads .org want ads for sale. A guy had another 77S that he wanted basically to give away. It was totally torn apart, and I bought that, sat in the garage, planned on refreshing that for podcast content. Somebody else made me an offer. They wanted to buy the bike. So I ended up selling the both of those bikes and came across this bike I just bought in that same time period. So all this was happening. And so the 77S world was just converging on me all at once, Nick. I think that's that's what happened. That's what led me all the way out to San Clemente, California.
So, okay. So you drove all the way out to get this R100S. I mean, how'd that go? How was the road trip? Was it
It was great.
uneventful?
Pardon?
Was it uneventful or full
Uh,
of drama?
no, super uneventful. My wife and I, we drove we left Arkansas, drove all the way to Albuquerque the first day,
Okay.
and met up with a friend, Casey, out there. We had dinner at a pizza joint, chatted Airheads with him. He's on ADV as CC Mickelson.
Hmm.
So he came down from Santa Fe. We had a couple beers and some pizza. That was fun. Next day,
Great.
we drove we went from Albuquerque to San Clemente. But these are about 12, 13-hour days. Um, Stayed in a beautiful hotel right on the beach in San Clemente, is right, I think, where the PCH starts, Pacific
Oh,
Coast
cool.
Highway, right where it begins, right around there. So it was a great one of these these are my favorite places to stay, is an all-in-one hotel. So you get there, you got your room. It's not like a box hotel, but this is like a ranch style hotel. Got the room. Walk down, there's the office. They've got a restaurant and a bar. So everything you need there. So we
Nice.
landed, checked into the room, cold beer, hung out, looked at the beach, went to sleep, woke up, coffee's in the bar the next morning. So that's ideal. Picked up the bike from the seller Friday morning, first thing Friday morning, and I think we'll see. Here's a few pictures we'll pull up. So
Yeah.
this first photo is me looking on the underside of the motorcycle, um, just sort of making sure everything looks legit. And
Right.
boy, Nick, let me tell you, this thing is clean with a K. It's pretty amazing that I'm so used to motorcycles and I'm on dirt roads all the time, and just they don't see this sort of uh, garage time, never seen rain activity. This bike, I mean, good grief, so clean, no oil drips, all the paint on the frame is nice, um, just just wonderful. The
Nice.
seller, Mike, really nice guy. He moved out there from Michigan originally.
Okay.
And his, I think his, I may get this wrong, his brother or cousin bought the bike in 1978 originally. So it's been in the family. Either his cousin or his brother had it. I can't remember.
So about as
Since
close to a first owner or a single owner as you're going to get
it's exactly
with
right. They
without it actually being a one owner.
they bought it. It was purchased in Michigan from a dealer called Andy Pelk. And there's some good chat on Adventure Rider about this. I think it's in the R100S chat thread that kind of started on this. But apparently Andy was a dealer, popular dealer in southern or middle part of Michigan for many number of years. And what he did apparently on this engine and many of the bikes that he sold, just to the right of the timing cover, he would take two metal stamps and just stamp in AP right there. And that way he knew when somebody brought in a bike for service that they purchased it at his dealership. And apparently it would get priority.
I was going to say, did it get special treatment,
I
or was
guess
it just
so,
he
yeah.
wanted to know?
I guess got special treatment. You know, they keep it in the heated section of the garage or something. I'm not sure. But there's some interesting stories on Adventure Rider because I chimed in. I was like, "What the hell does this AP mean?" And
Right.
got all kinds, all kinds of comments from folks who are like, "Oh yeah, Andy Pelk. Here's the deal. This, that, and the other thing. You know, as always, there's always a mixed bag of experiences."
I was going to say, I think I remembered some people
Yes,
were excited to see it and some people were annoyed.
that's
And that's
exactly
putting it
right.
mildly.
Yeah, exactly. As you would expect. You know, you
Right.
always get a mixed bag. So anyway, yeah, the bike came from Michigan. Mike was the seller, nice guy, and pretty uneventful as far as the purchase goes. I mean, I looked at the pictures, pretty good. The one thing I questioned him on, and I think he felt kind of bad about it, was he had put some luggage racks on, and he had the upper mounts, instead of putting them inside of the frame, again on the shock mounts on the shock bolts, he had put them on the outside of the frame.
So they were
And
kind of flared out a little bit.
yeah, I was like, dude, is there a reason why you put those there? And he's like, or is that how they're supposed to go? No. He said, oh, that's why something didn't fit right on there. I couldn't figure it out. So all that to say, Mike, who I bought the bike from, not that he was not an Airhead fan, but I mean, this was just happened to be a bike in his collection.
Right.
So, and not that he didn't realize it was a special bike, 1 year and all that kind of stuff. But he didn't strike me as sort of an uber aficionado like you and I might be, or our listeners are. He just enjoyed the bike for what it is.
Right.
And so it had 15,000 miles, super low mileage, had an NOS set of Krauser luggage that came with it.
Very cool.
Yeah. So both keys and the straps in there still work. You buy
They still actually have elasticity in them.
Well,
Wow.
they're not elastic. They're just hard, sort of a hard cloth, so they don't stretch.
Gotcha. I think I'm thinking of the later model ones.
Yeah. And so anyway, bike checked out good. The one thing I will say, the paint is a little bit more faded than the pictures show, and that's always the case. And believe me, I wasn't about to drive 1,800 miles and say, I can't buy this. I mean, I could have, because I told my wife, she's like, well, we're going to go get it. What if it's not right? And I said, yeah, if there's something egregious with it, this is just going to end up being a long road trip to see your sister. And we won't take it home. But that wasn't the case. The paint was a little bit more faded than I thought. If I were going on a scale, let's say no fade is 100, and then we go down from there, I would say it's at about the top of the tank and the rear of the seat cowl. I don't have any photos to show. There may be about 70%. So there's maybe about a 30% fade on there. But you have to expect that with paint of that era.
Well, those red ones were notorious for it.
The worst.
They faded like crazy.
Absolute worst. So rode the bike away. I jumped on it. Everything worked fine. Rode it to a place called, let's see here. I'll put this on my note. Oh, yeah. The Lookout Roadhouse. So Southern California listeners will know Ortega Highway, California 74. It goes from San Clemente to Lake Elsinore, I think it's called. And so it's a really popular motorcycle road in Southern California. Great ride. We stopped at the Lookout Roadhouse, had lunch and a sandwich, and then from there is about an hour and a half drive to Yucca Valley, right near Joshua Tree, where
awesome.
My sister-in-law lives. And so we just kicked it in Joshua Tree for a few days and hightailed it back to Arkansas. I saw my friend Upe Flukinger, who our regular podcast listeners know is Uber enthusiast, good friend of mine, and he did the Hans Muth interview. So I had visited some Airhead friends along the way. So all in
Very
all,
cool.
double thumbs up. Some of the other photos of the bike. There's one here of me driving off or firing it up for the first time in the garage. And then there is a Fuji what I think they call it Intex. It's kind of a Polaroid ripoff
Yeah.
of the bike at the Lookout Roadhouse. And then the final photo here is a little pit stop right before we got to Joshua Tree. You can see my Tacoma in the background. I was trailing my wife, who was leading the way with the GPS directions en route to Yucca. So
Very cool.
all around, Nick, just a great experience, great trip. I'm so fortunate. My wife likes doing this kind of stuff with me, and she's not crying about me, spending money on the motorcycles. So all good.
Very cool. I think it's funny that I started out earlier talking about the Forerunner, and here we are looking at a picture of your Tacoma, and they're the same exact color. We have the same exact color.
Oh,
Toyota.
you got the silver. Okay, yeah.
The silver mica, I think it's called.
Yeah.
I don't have the cool TRD stripes though. I might have to add those.
I put those on there.
Those look good. Those look real good.
Stripes. Yeah.
And they match your helmet and the bike really nice.
That's my theme. Those are my color themes. That's right.
I like it.
So yeah, well, and the last thing I'll say, Nick, is let's see. I did the math here. So we're going to hear my chat with Charles here in just a minute. So Charles round trip from Maine to Memphis to buy the bike. Round trip was 3,180 miles. So we're going from Maine to Memphis. I met him in Memphis, of course. So then I drove round trip. If we sort of let's just connect Arkansas and Memphis for this conversation. I drove round trip 3,600 miles from Arkansas to San Clemente and back. So that is a cross-country total between Charles and myself, a cross-country round-trip total, 6,780 miles to buy and sell two 1977 R100S motorcycles. Damn right.
Very cool.
Yes. That is some traveling, boy.
That's awesome. You touched on a lot of the things I wanted to ask, like mileage and history and condition and all that. Which is, I didn't realize it had such low mileage. I knew it was low. I didn't know it was that low. So super cool. What I wanted to talk quickly about is for anybody who's listening, right, who is looking at a bike, maybe that's across country, what kind of things would you kind of advise on, like how did you do payment? How did you feel confident that the drive that you were going to do was going to turn out to, end in the bike that you wanted? What pieces of advice would you pass on to somebody who wants to drive halfway across the country for a bike?
Payment is always a discussion between the buyer and the seller.
Right.
Generally speaking, what I've done on both ends of that is just ask for a small deposit, or I'll give a small deposit. So with Charles, the guy I sold the bike to, he offered to pay half of the asking price via deposit, via PayPal. I told him that wasn't necessary. I said a couple $100 in earnest money would be fine. He said, hey, I want to make sure. He wanted to send half the money. So I said, okay, fine. With on my end as the buyer, I just sent a couple $100 to Mike, and I told him, and he was fine with that. He said, send me what you want. In fact, he said, you don't need to send anything. I said, well, just let me send you a couple $100 so in earnest money. That way, I'm coming, that sort of stuff. So that's generally how that is handled. I've done that. I bought and sold, probably 50 bikes over the years, maybe 20 or so here in sort of modern times. And that's generally how that goes. A lot of it's a trust factor with the seller. You have to develop a good relationship on the phone, talk to the guy, ask some questions, 2 or 3 phone calls certainly help to do that. So that's sort of my MO with the money. And then with both ends on this, generally speaking, the balance is I just pay it in cash. So
Right.
Charles brought me cash, and then I had a big wad of $100 bills to give to Mike out in California. So
Very cool.
that's generally how that's handled. What was the second part?
I think you mostly covered it. I think one thing I just wanted to highlight in that, what you just said, is the phone.
Yes.
Get on the phone. And that's really me giving myself that same advice, like in this day and age, especially with Facebook Marketplace and all of the ways that you can buy online, when you're going across country to pick up a bike you've never set eyes or hands on,
Mm-hmm.
get on the phone. And if the seller's not willing to talk to you on the phone, you probably shouldn't be willing to buy that bike, because
That's exactly right.
if they want to sell it to you, they'll get on the phone and they'll answer your questions. And at least in my experience, even locally buying, cars, and I just bought another camp trailer just the other day, people are a lot more honest and a lot more forthcoming with information over the phone and in person. So as tempting as it might be to just talk to them via Facebook Messenger or text message, just get on the phone and talk to them.
Yep.
So I'm glad that you brought that up, because it's definitely helpful.
It is. I'll say this. The last thing, too, was a couple of years ago, I was looking at a 76 R90/6. It was in what they call Boldor red, I guess is how it's pronounced. And a guy was in East Tennessee, the Tri-Cities. So Bristol, Tennessee, we're close to Virginia and all that stuff. And I was here in Arkansas. He had an ad on, maybe it was Facebook. Anyway, saw the photos, everything looked good. I called the guy on the phone, talked to him, went over everything on the phone with him. And I felt confident looking at the handful of photos that I saw and talking to him on the phone. Everything was good. I made the 6+ hour drive, got there. The bike was not at all as he described.
Oh, no.
And I told him, hey, I'm not buying it. And he was really surprised.
Yeah.
And I just said, hey, because the rear main seal was leaking. I mean, he's asking pretty good money for it. It was low mile bike, but there were just I can't remember what was wrong with it. It was just a plethora of stuff. And I was just like, there's no way I can buy this. And I stayed the night in a hotel, but drowned my sorrow in a few beers and drove home the next day, and I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a good point, right? Like, be willing to walk away if you get there, phone calls or not. Like, if you get there and it's not what they were representing, don't be afraid to walk away. And I think that it points out to me, at least, something that was, I think smart about your trip, right? Like, you brought your wife, you had stops along the way that were, even if you got all the way out there and the bike was a no-go, you had other things to do on that trip, right? Like, so if you're going to do a big trip to pick up a bike, don't just hunker down and drive all the way out to get the bike and have no other plans. Like,
because you're really going to be bummed out.
Right. Like, enjoy your time on the road. Make some stops, whether you're camping or going to hotels, whatever it is. Make it more than just the bike pickup.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Like you say, in case it doesn't turn out, at least you'll have some other stuff to do. And most of us have friends across the United States that you don't get to see too often. So, yeah, we always try to route our trips to do this kind of stuff, to see friends or family.
Right. So, to wrap this one up, I got one last question.
Yeah.
This is the third one.
Okay.
Is this the R100S?
Yeah, capital THE,
all bold.
Yeah, yeah, it could be. Let's put it this way: it's not one. Two things. I came to this realization when I was looking at the bike in my sister-in-law's garage. I'd ridden it there, and finally had when you're riding it and everything's going on, nothing really has a chance to settle in. So we finally got there. This was Friday. I bought the bike Friday morning, rode it to her place Friday afternoon. We got there, whirlwind of activity. Finally, I think it was Saturday afternoon or Sunday morning or something. I'm looking at the bike that's when it set in. I was like, wow, I can't believe I actually bought this, all this travel and everything. And I realized, this is a bike probably that I won't be riding a whole lot like I do some of the other ones. I don't want to take this on the dirt road where I live.
Right.
Don't want it to cross the creek. It's really been well cared for, super low mileage, all the things we discussed. So I don't think I'm going to be riding it a whole lot. I think this will be maybe 500-600 miles a year. A couple trips in the spring. I go to Memphis and visit some friends in the spring and the fall, something like that. Otherwise, it's just going to be part of the collection. So in that regard, yes, this could be the one. I mean, as we mentioned, I've owned two of these before, and this is as close as you can get to an unmolested stock R100S from 1977. It's pretty amazing. So I'm going to say yes, this could be the one.
All right, sounds good. And because I'm an enabler,
Yes,
I'm hoping that everyone listening, if you find one of these that's in great condition,
yeah,
you got to send it to Darren.
Hey,
You're just going to dangle it in front of him and see if we can get 4 out of him.
Nick, you're not going to believe this, but I saw a sort of how should I describe this? A post that somebody has a 77 R100S for sale as part of a collection on Facebook, but it was with all these other pictures. And when you ask Facebook, you just never know what the F's going on there.
Yeah.
I emailed, I said, hey, is this bike for sale? It looks great. Said, is this bike for sale? I get a message from some lady called Sarah. Yeah, call this number.
Ooh.
And I said, well, which was okay. I'm not going in super skeptical right out of the bat. Here, they gave me a phone number to call or text.
Mm-hmm.
I said, do you have some more pictures you can send me before I call so I can ask the right questions? And this person, Sarah, wrote back, just text him, meaning her husband or whoever it was, and he'll send you more photos. So I haven't heard from that person, and I'll always be on the lookout for bikes of this era that are real low mileage and clean. So yeah, if you've got one, I'm all ears.
All right. Well, I'm interested to see if we get any comments on this video or or your inbox starts lighting up. So
we'll see.
Let me know.
We'll see.
All right. Well, that's mostly all we have for today. We're gonna go into this walk around video that you did.
Walk around audio.
Sorry, not video.
Right.
So why don't you set this up for us real quick before we jump over?
Real quick. So yeah, we're at an undisclosed location in Midtown Memphis, Tennessee. As mentioned, the buyer for this motorcycle, Charles, came in all the way from Maine. My wife owns an Airbnb in Memphis, so I told him, hey, drive to Memphis, get there on Friday, stay there Friday night. I'll be there Saturday morning. Met him at the house Saturday morning. He didn't want to leave like that afternoon, and that happened to be the weekend where there was some snow as well. So he waited till Sunday, early Sunday morning to leave. So basically I comped him a couple nights at the Airbnb at my wife's place there in Memphis, which was nice. So we did a little walk around, just basically front to back on the motorcycle. We're going to give you a virtual audio tour of this bike, and you'll hear he had some questions. And so if you're new to Airheads, there's some good information here just about sort of what gets refreshed and looked after on a bike of this era. And if you're a longtime Airhead rider, you can judge for yourself if I did this motorcycle justice.
Sounds good. Well, cool. Thanks everyone I know we went a little bit longer than normal here today. Right. So thanks for sticking with us, and
That's right.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will catch you next time on the Short Wheelbase. See ya.
Okay. We are in an undisclosed location in Midtown Memphis, Tennessee, and we're with Charles. Charles, it's new bike day. How you feeling so far?
Like a schoolgirl on Christmas Day.
I love it. So we've got this 77 R100S, and basically what we're going to do is kind of just go front to back. I'll tell you a little bit about what I did to the bike, and maybe a few things as a new Airhead owner you might want to know. Jump in, stop me, and ask me a question.
Absolutely.
All right. So first thing, let's just start at the front. So what we did with this particular bike, let's just start with the wheels, the front wheel. So this has got new bearings in it. When I bought the bike, I took the bearing pack out. It was a little rusty. You don't want rusty bearings.
Right.
Could have cleaned them and re-greased them. I just said to hell with it. We got new ones in there. So generally speaking, this should last you to the life of the motorcycle. There are some tools you can buy. There's a particular tool, I think a company called CycleWorks sells, which you put on the end of your grease gun. You insert it inside of the hub, and it squirts the grease out and it gets into the in there as well. You can also access one of the bearings, I think, if you had the wheel off to re-grease it. Basically, maybe you're not going to see the kind of like water crossings and off-roading that I do.
Yep.
Well, yeah, maybe every couple years, squirt some grease in there.
Good. I was going to ask.
Yeah, you don't necessarily need to do it every 3,000 miles. These are new EBC rotors, so that's good. Brake pads are new. New rubber brake lines. Somebody asked me, why didn't you go stainless steel, which a lot of people do. I just forgot. I just ordered them, and there they are. So fork internals have all been rebuilt. So we've got, if you never had one of these apart, there's a rubber bumper on the bottom here that it's kind of not even rubber really. It's some sort of silicone. Anyway, it usually turns to mush. And that's exactly what happened when I pulled these apart. So you've got all new internals, fork seals. There's a little piston pack that helps regulate the oil flow up there. So all the internals are new gators. And so you're good to go there. The tires still relatively new, balanced, and that's the front end.
Nice.
Okay, moving up here to the headlight and sort of dash area. So obviously this has been altered from what a normal S would look like.
Yep.
We put the gauge pods out of the fairing onto these little brackets here. And as I was telling you, if you ever put the S fairing on, the same brackets that these pods use will support the S fairing. This is an original clock with the, you'll actually hear it ticking.
Okay.
That this is still working is a minor miracle. Okay.
Is that electric or is it?
Yes, it is electric. And what I've done to kind of help prolong the life of this is, generally speaking, when I'm not riding it, I disconnect the battery so it's not just sitting there ticking and wearing itself out.
Right.
But they can be rebuilt.
Yeah.
Let's see, you've got an auxiliary switch here for your auxiliary lights.
Okay.
These are some old Trail Tech lights, which they don't make anymore, and there's a button on the back here, Charles, so it's got high, medium, and low.
Okay.
I generally just keep them full blast,
Yeah.
and you can shut these on and off there when the bike's powered up. Here's your heated grip switch.
Nice.
So off, low, high. When they're on high, they work really good.
Yeah.
So it's a nice feature, especially for where you are in the colder climates.
Correct.
When your hands are warm, it
It's
makes
good.
a difference, right?
Big time.
Somebody asked me what this was one time, and not knowing, I was going to put like something on there that said turbo boost. It's a 2 turbo boost, but anyway, so that's that, and that's a BMW part.
Okay.
As far as the switches go, these are original to the bike. What I did, if you ever get inside of the headlight, you'll see here I extended the wiring harness.
Okay.
So these would have been shorter wiring harnesses for the S bars.
Right.
So basically I just snipped them, soldered on a longer end, replugged them back in.
Yep.
You'll still be able to use this with the S fairing. You might just have to navigate a little bit of extra cabling inside of the headlight.
Right.
All right?
So what kind of, speaking of the headlight,
Yeah,
H4? What?
it is.
Yeah.
It's an
Okay.
H4. And interestingly enough, I had this apart over the summer. I actually took the headlight apart, cleaned the inside of the lens, and then resealed it with a new rubber ring. So a lot of times you'll get these and they'll be cloudy or foggy
Yeah.
on the inside. This one's nice and clean. And to take it off is really pretty simple. There's a screw right underneath here.
Okay.
Phillips set screw. Loosen that and it'll come off. And the way it goes back on, there's a little lip on the top. connect the headlight ring on that top lip, and it'll snap in down here, and then that set screw tightens it, and you're good to go. Some of the earlier models didn't have a screw.
So the bulb just unplugs?
Yep, from the
front.
back side. Yep.
Okay,
From the back side.
Gotcha.
And let's see. So also we're looking here, got new steering head bearings were replaced, so that's good. That's going to last you a lifetime.
Yeah.
That's always a big thing, especially with these used bikes. You don't know the history. If that's not been done, odds are it's going to need to be done.
Yeah.
So you're set up there. The tank. So this is original paint. Not in bad shape,
No, it looks good.
you know?
Yeah.
You'll see the interesting thing about this color is you can see where it started to fade a little bit. The UV, this was a single stage paint back in the day, so I don't think there was a clear coat.
Right.
And whatever they didn't use for UV protection, it shows.
Yeah.
But it's in good shape, all things considered. There's a little dent here on the side.
Yeah.
You can't really see it.
Yeah.
You know, it just gives it the right amount of patina, I think.
Do you lock this normally, or?
That was the next thing. So, see that screw right there?
Yeah.
All right. This is a pretty good design when it came out.
Right.
And what you would do is you'd turn this and it would click. Then, if you wanted to, you would lock it. Well, what happened with many of these gas tanks, the little internal mechanism failed.
Yeah.
And so sometimes a guy, if they were particularly concerned about somebody pouring sugar in their tank,
Yeah.
they would turn it, click it, lock it, and then when the mechanism broke,
Screwed.
you're kind of screwed.
Yeah.
That happened, but I didn't lock it. The fix is you just drill a self-tapping screw in there, it locks everything in place, and that's the deal here.
Yeah. That's good.
So don't lock it, and B, just get it to where it's tight. You don't need to crank it and listen to it click and clack.
10 o'clock.
Yeah, exactly. And the liner in there is still in really good shape. Somebody took care of it.
Nice.
One thing I did, usually in the off seasons, I would just take the tank off, drain it,
Yeah.
get all the gas out of it.
Yeah.
Because if you just let it sit, there's a few spots back here
Nice.
where,
I had a Ducati gas tank that rusted from the inside out. It
oh,
was
good grief.
horrendous inside. Externally, the bike looked showroom condition, but I never paid attention to the inside.
Wow, amazing.
That happened to me on a Sunday morning over in the New York area on a ride back to
That is-
my own undisclosed location.
Not the time that you want that to come up.
No.
All right, so on to the motor quickly here. So it's original top end, valves, pistons, all that stuff. Mileage is correct, 42,000 miles. I had the speedometer and tachometer rebuilt, refreshed, all that kind of stuff. So it's rare, in my experience, not rare, but you don't always get a odometer that accurately reflects the miles. This one I think is legit. As far as the top end goes, all I've done to this really is just reseal it. So the top ends come off, new push rod tube seals, seals around the gaskets on the valve cover here, and still original top end. Still runs good, plenty of torque and power. Carbs have been rebuilt just a couple years ago, so you're good to go there. With the exhaust header, one thing you want to make sure of, if you ever take these off for any reason, there's a little wrench that you may or may not want to buy. Always put some anti-seize back on those threads. Got lucky with this one. They weren't seized on there.
Yep.
It can be a pain in the ass if they do get stuck. So top end's good. We were talking about the con rods and one of the little tools I had there to help you get those off. I may have replaced, I can't remember if I replaced those shells in there. Another thing I did here, has dual horns. So originally this bike would have come with just a single horn on one side.
Right.
And I added the dual horns and a relay, which is good, so it doesn't toast. And also through that relay are the heated grips and the auxiliary lights. Right. So everything's running through there. And as I mentioned to you, that's a Syntec deal. And then I ended up buying that little relay kit so it's switched.
Yep.
So you can't leave the grips on if you accidentally leave the key on, which I've done.
Yeah.
Transmission, that was rebuilt by a fellow called Andy Cahora, Barrington Motor Works in New Hampshire.
Right.
So he's not far from you.
Yep.
Barrington Motor Works. He also did the final drive. So your driveline components, solid, going to be ready to go for a good amount of time. Let's walk over to this side here. We were talking about the side stand. One of the things we talk about on the podcast a lot. Oh, yeah, thanks.
Yep.
One of the things we talk about a lot on the podcast, people bemoan this side stand.
Oh, yeah.
And I noticed the first thing you pulled up, you were struggling with it right away,
Yeah.
as you should. The technique is, push it out with your foot, lean the bike over, get the weight on it, and you're good to go. It does self-retract. That's
Yep.
nice when you drive off.
Yep.
It's a problem sometimes when you're trying to park it. Center stand, commonly, this is welded on here. Somebody did a fix. It looks like they might have tapped it and screwed this in.
Yep.
So I put there's some fuel line and some cloth tape on there. Just you might want to tighten it up every once in a while.
I
Keep an
have
eye on it.
access to a welding sheet.
There you go.
Just have it welded.
There you go. Mufflers, these may or may not have been the original ones on there, but they're original BMW parts for it. The shocks are Coney shocks, so these would have been aftermarket replacements back in the day.
Yep.
They make them now. They're called Icon.
Right.
They just switched the name around, the letters around. These were rebuilt by a guy called Gage Wagner,
Yep.
who's on Adventure Rider as Solo Lobo.
Yep.
So he rebuilt these for me, and they're great. One thing you'll see here is underneath this rubber cover, you've got a 3 or 4 position
Yep.
dial. So you just lift that cover up. I think I've got it set on 2.
Okay.
And, if you want to stiffen it up a little bit, and then any sort of standard C-wrench will get your adjusters there. I've kind of got it on the middle one, on the middle set. I'm sure you'll find it just fine.
Yep.
All right, the seat. So, let's see, prop this up.
Let's see what I didn't see how you actually released it.
Yeah, so here, hold on to this. Just kind of keep that in front of my pie hole there.
Okay.
So under the seat, you've got a pump, of course. There's no toolkit, but I did give you a leather tool roll.
Okay.
So you've got that. This is an extra latch. The key actually works to it.
Nice.
So you've got that. There's your tool tray. New battery from October. You're
Yeah.
good to go there. And then underneath here, this is the ignition control unit for
Yep.
the wedge tail system. So that's right under there. Got your frame tube there. So that's usually that's where I'll stash insurance and registration.
Okay.
Good little stash spot for it. And then down here, you can see there's that relay
Yep.
for the auxiliary stuff. Got new rubber straps to hold on the battery covers. And yeah, so it's all solid underneath there. Now, we're talking about the seat. So one thing you'll notice here is got this foam on the back of this S seat. So in that extra box of parts where I had all the electric
Yep.
stuff, there's a little glove box that bolts on right there.
Yep.
And that'll help it fit a little bit tighter
Okay.
as well. It'll take up some of the slack on the back. Now, I kept that off because I was constantly swapping seats.
Yep.
If you decide you like this seat and want to keep that set up, just put that little toolbox on there, you're good to go. The way this comes off is there's 2 tabs on the frame, and what you do is just kind of bend her down,
I got you.
slide it off,
Yep.
and then it's a little bit of a ballet here. I'm gonna get one. Anybody who's done this knows.
Yep.
But there you go. So it's off. Then I was showing you the standard dual seat.
Yep.
It just
Pops
pops
right
on,
in.
pops right on. And then if you were to go with the solo seat, you got your rear rack there. And let me grab that seat and I'll show
Okay.
you. has a particular way to mount, and I saved this, taped it. So what you'll do on this is this little hinge goes on the outside
Okay.
there, and you'll have to take the battery cover off, and
Right.
it's a little bit of a fiddle, but you'll get it. So that goes on the outside of the frame
Yep.
like that, and then bingo, there you go.
The
Solo
other one
seat.
hooks on the
Yep.
normal way.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so yeah, like we were talking about with the solo seat set up with that rear rack,
Yep.
and then your saddlebags, boy, if you want to take a long trip or a long weekend trip somewhere, you're ready to go.
Yep.
Ready to go. As far as the rear end goes, to mention the final drive, been rebuilt, reshimmed, resealed, good to go there. This is the original Krauser rack that came with the saddlebags that you've got. As I was telling you, it's rare. You've got both keys, they both work, and they lock on here pretty good. Now, pretty good is a relative term. So these can be, those bags can fall off. Ask me how I know. I lost one about 3 years ago, and I spent a year looking for it. I never found it. So, all that to say, though, since these bags and rack are original to each other, they lock on here better than most that I've seen.
Yeah.
What you might want to do, I use a thing called a rock strap, which is
Right.
kind of a, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I've made a little configuration to where I'll just rock strap the bag around the frame, and that way you've got extra peace of mind. So you might want to think about that. As far as the rear tail light goes, only modification here, you've got a LED
Yeah.
board in the back, so it's a little bit brighter. And I added a mud flap on here. It's kind of a neat little look.
Yep.
Just gives a little bit of style and flair. You've got a new Dunlop K70 on the rear. Not a high performance tire.
I'm not a high performance rider anymore, so
That's what I like to hear.
we're in alignment.
Yeah, I mean, Charles, if I would get up to 70, 75 miles an hour on this, it was a rare thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a tootler, right?
Yeah.
So that should last you a good while. I put that particular tire on there because in Arkansas, where I'm at, little traction
Yeah.
helps. You may go to something a little less aggressive when it comes
I
time
like
to change it.
that.
It's
Yeah.
got a good look to it,
Same,
right?
same kind of thing where I live in Maine.
Yeah, exactly. So that's basically the overview here. Any sort of questions or thoughts?
No, back to the seats.
Yeah.
So I saw that you fiddled with something. Did you just, is that what you pressed
Yes.
to get it? Okay.
Yep. That button there releases the
Okay.
latch.
I didn't see that.
Yep.
So.
And one thing to note with that is on the back of this latch, there are two Phillips screws that sort of hold the mechanism together.
Right.
Now, every once in a while, it's a good idea just to check those.
Okay.
I may or may not have Loctited those.
Yep.
I can't remember. And then any kind of, I use like a graphite spray or tri-lube.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, just give it a little tss, tss. Keep that functioning well. This is interesting. I'll tell you about this. So in Germany, it was required that these stickers were on there because for TUV inspections, you could not alter the tire type or size. So that's why these were original on these bikes.
Mm-hmm.
I've got one that came from Germany that has the sticker on there. Of course, it's written in German. But the idea being, theoretically, you couldn't pass inspection if you wanted to use a wider tire,
Right.
a smaller tire. And these would tell you, okay, these are the brands and sizes that are permissible.
Leave it to the crowds.
right. Drum brake on the rear. I don't think I've touched the shoes.
Yeah.
I mean, they'll probably last you the life of the bike.
Let's go back over to the other side.
Yeah.
So you had, when you pulled in, you had the negative terminal
Yeah.
unplugged.
Yep. So the way, and this is not a perfect setup. There's the battery tender there.
Yep.
It's not a perfect setup. So this negative terminal grounds to the frame, and that bolt right there is actually also a breather bolt.
Okay.
And so it releases crankcase pressure or pressure in the transmission.
Right.
So it's a vent bolt. So make sure there's a little hole there.
Yep.
That should never be plugged. What I did was, instead of a closed loop on that negative terminal, I snipped the end so it's like a horseshoe.
Right.
So you can loosen that bolt just ever so gently, pull the negative thing off, and that way the clock doesn't run. One thing I've noticed, though, Charles, is the way this is hooked up with the relay, the positive and negative components are still running through the fuse block.
Okay.
So you might unhook the negative terminal,
Right.
and there's remaining voltage in there.
Okay.
So you'll unhook it, and you'll be like, and this happened to me. I'm like, what in the hell's going on? The clock's still turning. I unhooked the negative terminal. Well, what I'll do then is just turn the key on. It uses up,
Okay.
this is my theory,
Yep.
it uses up the remaining charge, and then the second hand will stop. So I would suggest doing that for the winter months, or if you're not going to be using it anytime. In the summer, if you're riding it to work every day and stuff
Yeah.
like that, no, you don't need to take it off
Okay.
all the time. But it's just sort of a handy feature. Also, very important with that, if you ever have to take the timing cover off the front,
Right.
so if you needed to access the rotor or parts of the electronic ignition or anything under the timing cover, this has to be removed first.
Yep.
Otherwise, it'll spark.
Yeah. Gone.
Yeah, you'll toast a lot of stuff in there. So that makes that easy too. If you ever have to work on the front end or get underneath the cover, off it goes, you're ready to go.
And these side covers, this is the rubber band
Yep.
setup. Okay.
Yep, there's two of them.
Yeah.
There's a couple tabs in the rear of the cover that hold it on.
And those prevent them from flying off.
Theoretically.
Wrong time.
Theoretically. Yeah, I change these every couple years.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you should be good to go there. The other thing, let's walk over to this side. If for any reason you needed to take this cover off, I don't know why, but you might have to, this bolt and handle have to be removed and come up first.
Yep.
If you don't, what'll end up happening, and you'll see so many side covers from this era, they'll be like, God damn, I can't get this off.
Right.
And it's cracked.
Yeah. I've seen write up on
Yep.
that online.
So this has survived, believe it or not. Look at that. Not cracked. So
Good.
whoever had this before us did a good job with that. Original decals and stuff. So yeah, just that lift handle, make sure it comes off, and it'll make it easier to get the battery out too. As far as the clutch throw out and components down here, this is all new underneath here. There's a little rubber boot and stuff like that. The cables are all new. So you're good to go there. You'll see any kind of adjustments you need to make, whatever.
I think I read that you did the rear main seal too.
I did, rear main seal and the oil pump.
Yeah.
So, you should be good to go. My only experience with wearing out a clutch was about 75,000 miles.
Yeah. I had a leak on my GS at 30,000,
Okay,
and it, ruined the clutch components.
there you go. So,
Let me ask
What
a
else? Yeah.
question without trying to start a war
Yeah.
online. What kind of oil
Oil.
do you use?
great. I'm glad. No, that's a totally legit question. If you've heard the podcast, we ask guys this all the time. What oil do you use?
I'm a dyno guy.
All right, so me too. And it's kind of a silly question, like you say, he's going to start a war with somebody over it. I use what I think the general consensus is for these, and a lot of older machines, is Valvoline VR1.
Okay.
Valvoline VR1 2050.
Yep.
It's got the ZZZNPDQR,
Yeah.
whatever that is,
Yep.
in there. Never had any problems with it. That's what I use. I think BMW also sells oil that's probably formulated for this as well. As far as the oil changes go, every 3,000 miles, general rule, you're going to want to do it.
Yeah.
Check your valves then
Yeah.
as well. That's a really easy proposition to do. Depending on sort of your riding style and where you are, I've not always changed the filter.
Right.
I may wait 2 oil changes sometimes. Somebody will be like, why the hell are you doing that? Why don't you just change it? Well, maybe I didn't have one. I don't know. But generally speaking, every 3,000 miles, if it's just an oil change, 2 quarts, if you do the filter, 2 plus.
Okay.
And you'll find out all that information online.
Yep.
What else? Oh, I think of something to tell you here. So these little standoffs for
Yep.
the brake line come off the crash bar.
Right.
So now I bought these after the fact, and so I'd already put on new brake lines, and then realized, oh, I should get these little standoffs. So instead of dismantling the whole
Yeah.
brake system and bleeding it, I just cracked the
Okay.
grommet.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a legit move.
Yeah. That's
As far speaking of brakes and the front brakes, so this has an under tank master cylinder. Have you seen that setup?
Actually, I have not seen that.
Okay, so they leave a bit to be desired by some folks. Airhead of this era with double discs is
Yeah.
good. An airhead of this area with a single disc, it can be sketchy. So I did rebuild the master cylinder. There's some rubber seals underneath it. I cleaned it internally. The piston and seals are new in there, so you should be good to go. Every once in a while, if you get the tank off, and I can show you how to do that when we're done here, it's good to just look at it and make sure nothing funky's going on there. As far as new fluid and doing the brake fluid, every couple years is a good idea. As you know, it'll start to get brown and pick up water. The one trick I'll tell you, having done this a lot of times, there's a million ways to skin the cat when it comes to doing the brakes. Generally, what I do, Charles, is drain the line with a hand pump, pump the new fluid through. I mean, you know the drill.
Yeah.
And just get it to where, you might get it to where, hey, the handle comes all the way to the grip, but,
Right.
but it's still actuating the pads. All I've done, I just get a good pump through, get it so it's actually working. And you might have done this before. Just zip tie the handle.
Yeah.
You'll wake up in the morning,
Yeah.
good to go.
Right.
You've got underneath here, this is a screw for the throttle lock.
Okay.
So for some reason, I mean, you can tell this bike starts and settles into idle pretty quickly.
Yep.
That's the only reason I would use this, is if I just wanted to keep the throttle on, sans the choke. As far as a cruise control, it's not really effective.
Yeah.
You'll notice, so these grips are new because they're heated grips.
Yep.
Got a nice snapback on the throttle there.
Yep.
And the only thing, as I was preparing to bring this to you, I sent you an email, checking over everything, lights, switches, this, that, and everything. The high beam indicator wasn't working. I was like, you gotta be kidding me. So I opened up the dash here, the gauges. There's, and I think you saw a picture of it, there's that circuit board.
Yeah.
There's a little copper tab, and the little bulb and socket that operates that high beam light
Right.
pops into a little slot, and one of the copper tabs had corroded and fallen off. Maybe you could repair it. If you can, I want to see how you do it. I just bought you another one.
I'll go the easy route.
Yes. And so let me show. So to remove this, we'll just talk about this since you'll eventually want to do it. First thing you want to do is these are both mechanically driven, so that's kind of a lock nut there. And same on each side. These are only hand tight.
Okay.
So remove the cables. All right. And then these 3 bolts here in the front, those are just pressure bolts, so they don't need to come out all the way.
Okay.
You just back those off enough.
Is it 2 or 3?
3 of
See,
them.
3. Yeah, the third one's
And
covered.
here's all you do. Just, that's on there enough to where you can do that. Just loosen those. They don't come all the way off, and then it'll
Pop right
it'll
out.
pull up on the front. Here's the tricky part on this. So here's the multi-plug pin.
Yep.
There's the holding screw right there.
Yep.
Now what you'll need to do is lift the gauges up, get a kind of a tiny screwdriver,
Okay.
maybe magnetize it.
Yep.
I've dropped that before, and it was like a Pink Panther episode trying to find it. So anyway, loosen all that stuff, pull the multi-pin connector off, and then you'll have the gauges in your hand. From there, you can probably find somebody online who's taken it apart. Really, all it is, Charles, is there's a couple, some Phillips screws,
Yeah.
a couple straight screws. Take the covers off. You'll get to the back. You'll see where that circuit board, it's held on by 3 screws.
Okay.
Pull it out.
So nothing in here is going to spring open?
Nope.
Okay, good.
It's fairly simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not going to need to sort of set anything back or hold anything. Pull out the old circuit board. And when you're putting it back in, pay careful attention to those. One thing, before you pull it out, you'll see on the side there's the bulb in question.
Yeah.
And it comes out, and that's what sends, there's a little plastic cavity, and the light shoots through this little tunnel
Okay.
to that blue light. So you pull that the bulb and socket out. When you put that circuit board in, make sure those copper tabs are in their proper place.
Okay.
If I'm honest and I think about it, probably what happened was at some point when this was monkeyed with, those copper tabs got bent.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what happened.
Yeah.
They got damaged that way. And that, again, that's a pretty simple operation. And this was rebuilt 2023, so serviced, lubed, and all that kind of stuff. In fact, I noticed when I had this apart, I sent it to a place called Foreign Speedo
Yep.
in California. I saw they wrote serviced FS 1023. So it's all good.
So the beams work. It's just the
Yes.
indicator.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And you've got with the switch, with the headlight, if you click it up, that's on.
Yep.
And they have a feature here to where you can flash to pass.
Okay.
So you
right.
can just give the little
Yep.
like that. Horn, of course. You're going to have to get used to these switches and stuff.
Yeah.
So just be careful. If you're riding in the city a lot, you might as well just leave the headlight switch on.
Right.
I'm in a rural environment, so it made sense for me. I would leave it off if I was, I'm not on a major road. And then you've got a 3-position key. So as I was telling you, if you've got the headlight off and you kill the bike with the kill switch,
Yeah.
you might forget that the key's on.
Right.
The dash light should tell you that, but
Yeah.
I've even walked away from it before and left it on all night.
So for the life of my ownership of bikes, I've always taken the key out.
There you go.
I'm just
Good.
hardwired that way. So
There you go. Well, like I said, Charles, it's not perfect. You're getting into a 50-year-old motorcycle, but as you can tell,
Yeah.
I've done a lot to sort of update it, get it in good shape, and I think you're going to have a lot of good years out of it.
if I wasn't excited, I wouldn't have driven 26 hours to get here.
No. Well, congratulations. Anything else?
No, you've done a great job of
Good.
explaining it all.
Good.
Thank you.
Good. Excellent. All right.
Thank you. All right.
Perfect. Good. That'll be a fun little
awesome.
segment. Yeah. Thanks for joining us on the Short Wheelbase podcast, presented by the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America. To join the club, visit bmwmoa.org. You can find full-length episodes of the excerpts heard here on the Airhead 247 podcast. The Short Wheelbase podcast is produced and edited by Nick Malozzi. Audio segments by Jeff Glover. You can check in with Nick at Airhead Misfits on Instagram.